In this video, I'm going to address the number one piece of misinformation regarding Bitcoin's energy usage and supposedly that it's bad for the environment. I'm going to argue that Bitcoin is actually one of the most powerful forces for helping the environment. Usually when people criticize Bitcoin, they don't even address the value proposition of uncensorable money that can't be inflated away, has no borders, very hard to confiscate, etc. They think it's worthless to begin with, and then they compare it to how much energy is being used in other places. But they never use the same logic to talk about Netflix and how much energy that uses, or video games, or flying planes, because they think those things have a particular use and the usage of energy is justified. What I'm going to argue in this video is not that the use of Bitcoin is justified or not, or how good it is, but even if it was completely worthless, that it's actually one of the most powerful forces to actually help reduce carbon emissions and not the other way around. Before I get started, I wanted to address the issue of misinformation, also known in the Bitcoin community as FUD, which is short for fear, uncertainty, and doubt regarding Bitcoin. Bitcoin displaces the ability for governments to print money and to benefit the people they want or hurt the people that they want. Bitcoin is trying to replace a system of money where a few people can print money at a whim, give it to whomever they want, and basically take it away from everybody else. If you had that power, would you want a system to displace it? Obviously not. So you put a lot of power creating misinformation and trying to stop this new force as best you can. So let me address how Bitcoin specifically helps reduce carbon emissions in the entire planet. I'm going to talk about some energy basics, some Bitcoin mining basics, and how when you put them together, you can see that very clearly Bitcoin is a force for a reduction of carbon emissions and an improvement in renewable energies.
Energy supply and demand basics. Most energy produced is wasted. When you look at this chart, you can see all of the sources of energy with non-renewables at the bottom all the way to renewables at the top. And you see how much energy is rejected. Rejected energy is energy that's lost due to inefficiencies. So it's lost in heat or transmission and things like that. Of all the energy created, which is 97.3 quads, 65.4 is rejected energy. And this also includes energy that's created and it's not being consumed. Let me go over that for a second. And by the way, I'll put all of the links under the video so you can see these images directly and directly from the sources so you can verify it for yourself. This chart is a representation of energy demand. Energy demand fluctuates all of the time per geography. So if it is winter and it's very cold, you need a lot of energy to heat. And when it's not that cold, you don't need as much. And if it's summer and you need air conditioning, you need a lot of air conditioning. And if everybody goes to sleep and it's at night, you need less air conditioning. So you have a fluctuation in demand from day to night, from when people are at work to when they come back, throughout the year, whether it's winter or summer. And this just represents the peaks and troughs of energy demand. Energy supply has to be built for these peaks. So whenever you build an energy grid, it has to be able to accommodate the absolute highest demand for energy at any given point. And what happens is because the demand fluctuates, you have a lot of energy that is available that has been created, whether it's nuclear or hydro or any other form that you're able to put out. However, it's not being used. So all of that infrastructure is wasted. The energy could be made or is made and it cannot be used. When you get to renewables, it's even worse because the production is also intermittent, right? If you're doing solar and then the sun shines very much and you have this big production, but suddenly nobody's using the energy, then there's a huge amount of energy that's created that can't be used. And I'm going to go into storage in a minute. And the same thing happens on the other side. If there's a high demand, but suddenly the energy is not there, you simply don't have enough energy being produced. So the first concept is that there's a lot of wasted energy because either the energy supply varies, and even if it's stable, the demand varies. Energy is not efficiently stored. One of the arguments is that energy can simply be stored and used up later. Let me debunk that. As we saw in this chart, the energy consumption is 97.3 quads, but that includes energy that is wasted. Energy services that's actually consumed is just under 32 quads. According to Wikipedia, each quad is 33,434 gigawatts of energy. According to the EPA, the total storage in the US, 94% of which is in the form of pumped hydroelectric storage, the total amount is 25.2 gigawatts of storage capacity. With a total storage of 25 gigawatts and a consumption of 31 quads, that's a total of 1,036,000 gigawatts. The total storage capacity in the US right now is 0.002%, not 2%, 0.02%. It's completely insignificant. Finally, energy is lost in transmission. Here's an article that I'll link for you in which it shows that between 8 to 15% of energy is lost from its production all the way to consumers receiving it. And here's another engineering side also that goes into the loss per distance. Obviously, the further you have to carry the energy, the more is lost. Now, let's go over some Bitcoin mining basics.
So I'm not going to go very much in depth into hash rate and how it adjusts. Here are the very basic components of it. Every 10 minutes, a new Bitcoin mine is blocked. And this Bitcoin block is mined by computational power known as hash rate. The more people are contributing energy and computational power to the system, the more difficult this reward becomes, and the less people are participating, the easier it becomes. And it adjusts basically so it keeps minting blocks at every 10 minutes. So if suddenly the amount of people providing computational power doubled, in other words, twice as much energy was being spent in the system, the hash rate would then adjust to double the difficulty. So then it would maintain blocks at every 10 minutes. During that period of time, the blocks came in at every 5 minutes. It's the same thing happens. If it drops in half, then it becomes twice as easy, making sure that the blocks come in every 10 minutes. So this has a very interesting property in which people are competing, and the people who can have access to energy at the cheapest possible rate are going to beat the people that have more expensive energy.
Here's a visual example of how that would work. Let's say you have 3 different miners. Each one of them has access to electricity at different price points, 10, 15, and 20, and they're all mining. Whoever can provide electricity at a lower rate will displace the next miner. So for example, let's say somebody's able to get energy at $12. That person would then start mining and displace the person who has energy at $20. And this miner now becomes unprofitable and will then stop mining simply because they don't have access to cheap energy. Putting these ideas together, let's go over how Bitcoin is the world's greatest renewable energy incentive. Every 10 minutes, 6.25 Bitcoins are the reward that miners get for the job of securing the Bitcoin network through mining. So there are 24 hours in a day times 60 minutes. So there's 1,440 minutes a day. And there's a Bitcoin block every 10 minutes. So there's 144 blocks per day times 6.25 Bitcoin per block. The system is rewarding 900 Bitcoin per day. At a price of 20,000, the Bitcoin network is paying $18,000 a day to miners. Now, the miners that have access to the cheapest electricity will stay in the network, and the miners that have access to more expensive electricity will be booted out of the system. So when we go back to this chart, what happens is during peak hours where the electricity is very much in demand, the electricity is expensive because there's a demand for it. And when it drops to very low demand, the electricity is cheap. And that is where the mining takes place. So suddenly, nuclear and hydro that would have a few peaks of electricity usage over time now has a constant demand for electricity that's being used for electricity that literally was being thrown away in waste. And this becomes even more important for energy in intermittent sources like wind and solar. When in the middle of the night, there's a huge gust of wind and a lot of electricity is produced, but everybody's sleeping, now that wind turbine can sell the electricity into the Bitcoin system and be rewarded for existing.
So Bitcoin becomes the buyer of last resort. And by doing so, it makes renewable energies profitable from day one without any subsidies, and actually investing significantly more money in making them profitable than any government is doing. By making it profitable, it incentivizes much more creation of these renewable sources of energy. In addition to these incentives, Bitcoin mining has been used to get any of the wasted energy that's being thrown away as energy, but also as emissions. A great example is gas flare from oil production and shale. When extracting energy in oil and gas, a lot of methane is released. Typically, that methane would just be burned away and going into the environment in a very detrimental fashion. It is actually way more harmful to the environment than carbon itself. Bitcoin, however, gets all of this methane, converts it into energy, and removes it from the environment. According to a study I'm going to point out here, just this would be responsible for a 5% reduction in emissions by Bitcoin mining. To conclude, Bitcoin mining makes renewable energy production profitable from day one and consumes a lot of this energy that would have just been released into the environment, making it much greener than it would have otherwise been. So next time you hear somebody say that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, make sure you let them know that it's the opposite. And Bitcoin is going to be at the forefront of making the world much greener and much more environmentally friendly.